Hello and welcome to another episode of the MMF podcast, part 3 in our October History of Horror series. What are we focusing on this week, Nick?
Well, I'm excited because we're talking about some of the 90s and early 2000s era of horror, which we sort of mentioned earlier as being a bit of a weird time for the genre, but I'm interested to discuss and see how we feel about them.
Sure. Yeah, when I think 90s, it's not the first thing I think of when I think like the movies from that era, more like the dramas or comedies, some action stuff. Jurassic Park, Forrest Gump, Dumb and Dumber. I don't really jump to horror. My brain doesn't jump to horror, so we'll see what that decade really had to offer. And there are some gems. What do you want to dive into
Well, yeah.
first, Nick?
Well, I suppose you're sort of right to have that thought because with the previous ones we talked about, horror sort of just got played out like with all the slasher stuff. So as you move into the 90s, like those movies started to like go downhill, like box office wise, quality wise. And so it just became like, okay, what even is the horror genre? Is it just dead? And so there's at least two movies that came out that sort of revolutionized the genre and revitalized it. One is kind of a pseudo horror movie. Like some people don't know if it's horror or if it's more of a drama thriller, but that's Silence of the Lambs, which you watched for the first time recently.
Yes, I did. Do you want me to go into like my thoughts initially, or do you want to explain like the premise a little bit?
Sure, I'll explain then. Yeah, I'm interested because we haven't really talked about what you think of it yet. I've seen it a couple times already, and like, anyone who has seen it knows it's like sort of a police procedural movie. It sort of launched that genre in a way. It wasn't like the first, like Law and Order came before it, but it very much popularized police procedurals as like a genre itself. And so we're going to see that in a couple movies later on too. But it's about Clarice Starling on the track to catch a serial killer on the loose, and she gets help from another serial killer already locked up, Hannibal Lecter, played by Anthony Hopkins. And that's just the general premise and leading you into everything going in there. So, what did you think of it when you saw it, Paul?
I actually really enjoyed it. It's not like the typical movie that I go out of my way to see, but the dialogue was fantastic. It was entertaining the whole time. They really built up, the whole mystery and suspense. It was entertaining in several ways. It was scary. It was fun, like discovering all the different clues, sort of like a Scooby Doo, but like more fucked up. And then also there was a little bit of, I wouldn't say action, but there's some fun, like, well, not, I wouldn't say fun either. All right, let me start this over. That was a shitty shit explanation of the movie. All right. So to sum up Silence of the Lambs, it's not necessarily the movie that I would go out of my way to see, but I had a ton of fun while watching it. It was very suspenseful. The story was put together very well. All the dialogue was very entertaining. I never felt bored throughout the whole thing. And then I really enjoyed the twist ending as well. I was on the edge of my seat for the whole last third act of the movie, I would say. It hits on a couple of fronts. It's a scary. The movie has moments that are terrifying. It's fun to kind of unlock the clues, sort of trace the steps of the killers to try and find out, who they are, what they do, why they do what they do. So there's like the mystery element to it. Um, yeah, I think it's a solid home run of a movie overall, and I had a lot of fun watching it for the first time. And people always talk your ear off about the Hannibal Lecter character, and rightfully so. It's a fantastic character, but personally, I was way more interested and freaked out by Buffalo Bill.
When you say twist ending, are you talking about that like awesome piece of editing where like the cops are going to the wrong house and then Clarice is at the right house and they make you think they're in the different spots? I love that scene.
That shook my fucking world, dude. I was like, "Oh no, Clarice, no, no!" Are you looking for anyone? Or you find any like fingerprints or anything? How's the status of the investigation going? I was like, fuck, 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 fuck.
What about Precious, Buffalo Bill's dog? Do you like her?
She's an innocent creature. It's not her fault that she's stuck with that freak. Dude, he was so creepy. Remember the scene with the hole? Well, the girl was in the hole. It's like, put the lotions on its skin, or it gets the hose again. Put the fucking lotion in the basket. You know, that was so fucking creepy, dude. There are people that really do shit like that.
Yeah, no, I mean that's what works well about the movie in general. Is it's sort of just about like how there's evil people just in the world, and they're always just like, like impossible to find. Like they're just walking in plain sight, and that's sort of tied into the ending where Hannibal Lecter has escaped and he's just walking out into the public, and you start to just lose where he is. Like he just blends right in.
Yeah. Also, like, you got to be kind of active of your surroundings, right? Like in public, you always got to, kind of be on alert for creepy people. Buffalo Bill catches his victims. He's just trying to put a couch in a van. He asks, "Earl, can you help me out? Can you grab the other side of this couch? Hop in the van for a second." You know, that it could be as simple as that somebody gets kidnapped. So, it's a good thing to watch a movie like this, and especially younger people, alert them like, hey, always be on watch, don't help suspicious characters.
Yeah, I think there's like sort of like a element of realism that became very popular in horror around the next like decade or so. Not necessarily like always realistic, but like grounded more in a sense. So like for instance, like the movies we're going to talk about like Scream and Saw for instance, or even something like Blair Witch Project or Paranormal Activity. These all like aim for a sense of realism or a sense of authenticity that, Freddy Krueger and Michael Myers weren't necessarily going after.
For sure. I think a character that really exemplifies the realism in this movie is the actress that played the girl in the hole. She was fantastic. When she screams, when she sees the other girl's fingernails on the wall, that was such a real like scream of terror. And then other moments in the movie too, like when she grabs Precious, like that's like an intelligent character. That's probably the first thing that somebody would think in that situation. If I get the dog, maybe I can negotiate my way out of here. And then I love the part when Clarice gets into the room and she's like, "Is Buffalo Bill in this room?" And she's like, "How the fuck should I know? I'm in a fucking hole." I cracked up during that part because that's so real. How the fuck would she know? She's stuck down there. She can't see shit.
No, yeah, it's great. It's like got plenty of moments of humor too and everything. Um, what was I gonna say? Oh, like we talked about like horror movies and like awards and stuff. Silence of the Lambs is the only movie to get like the five big Oscars. It got like director, picture, actor, actress, and screenplay, which is kind of insane to think about. That like no other movie has just like swept in that sense, but Silence of the Lambs did that. It was so beloved when it came out.
Wow. That is crazy. I think Misery maybe won an Oscar. Kathy Bates maybe. Is that like the only other one in the '90s that won a Oscar?
Oh, I don't know if like I wouldn't say there's no other horrors that won Oscars that decade, but in terms of those five specifically, like all for one movie, that's the only one that's done that.
Yeah, they usually win for like makeup or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, Silence of the Lambs, solid thumbs up. Also, another great twist is the Hannibal Lecter one when he has the face on his face.
Yeah, so the first time I saw Silence of the Lambs was in my trials class in college, or not college, had high school, and our teacher just like, came up with any excuse to show us any kind of movies. It was kind of awesome. But I remember seeing that scene for the first time, and I was like, "What the fuck?" Because I felt like I knew everything about this movie. I knew so much from like Watch Mojo lists when I was like 10 years old or whatever the fuck, but I didn't know about that twist, and that like rattled my brain when I saw it.
I was a little bit spoiled because I saw The Office for the first time when I was like 11. I remember the episode where Dwight puts the dummy's face over his face. Like he does like the Hannibal Lecter click, whatever the fuck that is. I forget how to do it. But yeah, Dwight puts the face over his face. Totally ruined the spoiler
Mhm.
for me.
Well, another movie, um, specifically in the 90s, that sort of revolutionized horror was Scream, and the way it was sort of a reflection of the slasher movies that came in the decades before it, and how it was sort of just like, sort of reacting to everything they like created with tropes and like characters. And you would think like with like satirizing all that, it would like stop slashers forever, but it sort of just reinvigorated interest, and sort of Scream led to a bunch of copycats later down the line. Like I Know What You Did Last Summer and Urban Legend, despite Scream very much like calling out all these tropes to begin with, it set its own in the process.
You got to know the rules.
Don't play it again.
No, we're not gonna play it again. I love that video though. You did a great job.
Thank you.
We're playing it again. Play it again. Play it again.
Vince McMahon reference?
Yeah, dude.
No.
Vince McMahon reference. Dude, I love the first two Scream movies. I've only seen 3 and 4 once, both with you, but I've seen Scream 1 at least 3, 4 or 5 times now. Scream 2 I think twice. Uh really solid movies. Just like you said, they're like an homage to the classic of the classic elements of slasher movies, but they're also kind of their own thing in the way that they're very meta. And there's a little bit of Scooby Doo element in it as well. Like who's the killer? You meet all different characters along the way. It's fun to guess like who's the killer as they slowly get picked off one by one. The characters. I like how when we watch
Yeah, I
them
think the big,
together, I like how when we watch them together before the final act, you always pause the movie and go, "All right, guys, who do you think is the killer?" It was like our chance to guess. Like it was fun as we were going through the quadrilogy.
no, I think that's a big reason for its success is like the fun element to it, and just the characters in general are so likable. Like when I was showing it to you and our other housemates, like you all just like love Dewey, David Arquette, or like Matthew Lillard. Like there's characters are just very like funny and silly, and it's just like an enjoyable movie to watch like with company.
He's like stabbed like 3 or 4 times. He's bleeding to death. I'm getting a little woozy here, man. Matthew Lillard
Matthew
just goes
Lillard
all
bouncing
out.
off the wall.
Yeah, he goes all out with every role.
He's great. Love him.
I know. It's a shame that he couldn't have come back for Scream 3. Unfortunately, because the you said the Columbine shootings, they didn't want to have like teenagers be the killers at the time.
Yeah, and that was like going back to the point of like realism is like, Scream was like weirdly ahead of its time, having like just two high school boys. Like that was one element when I was younger that like was always confusing to me, where I was like, okay, I could see Billy's motive here. I don't know how he got Stu to go along with him, like how both of them decided to do this together. But like as we would see just in the later years, it becomes very common for people to just like commit like mass slaughter against their classmates, and it's very like haunting in retrospect. And like clearly the executives at Miramax saw the same thing and forced them to change the script for Scream 3 because they saw the connections there.
Yeah, and didn't you also tell me there was these two kids like years later that watched Halloween and Scream and like a bunch of horror movies and they like killed some girl in their high school together, just like Billy
Oh,
and Stu
it's
did.
probably like there's probably like a couple. I know there's the one like YouTube video of that policeman like interrogating the kid, and they were called the Scream Killers specifically because they liked Halloween the same way like the characters in this movie liked Halloween. So it was just like eerily similar the way they murder their classmates.
Yeah, and they like took a. I remember seeing like a video of them like in the car, like holy shit, we just killed someone. Like what fucking
Ugh.
disgusting people, dude. And it's like you know how they always say these kinds of movies inspire like the terrible shit. 99.9% of the time, you're a normal person that just watches a scary movie. They're like the 0.01% that actually took it like seriously and ruined their
Mhm.
lives and someone else's lives. So that sucks.
No, for sure. That's kind of what I love about the opening of Scream 2. Like like it seems silly, but it's sort of brilliant in a way where he sets it in like a movie theater and they're watching Stab, which is essentially Scream in the universe of Scream. And like all these people are just like excited about like watching a horror movie. They're like, killer, stabber. And then
Stab, 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 stab.
meanwhile there's an actual just murder happening right in front of them and they don't even notice, which like, it might seem silly if you're being like very like particular about it, but like I think it's a very profound statement for the movie.
For sure. And I like how they keep going with the stab sequels as the Scream sequels go on. It's like stab 4, stab 5, stab 6.
Yeah.
They keep with like the meta theme all throughout the whole series, and it's good that even when Wes kind of stepped away from the project, they never really stepped away from that element.
No, for sure. And I mean, it's interesting that like Scream is so meta and satirical in horror movies, and yet somehow still got parodied in its own right with Scary Movie, which like I know you love Scary Movie, but like as time has gone on, I'm like Scary Movie's fucking stupid.
Well, it's a parody of a parody.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, the first scary movie is funny. I know it's stupid. It is stupid, but there are some moments that are very, very funny. I specifically like the scene where they're driving in the car and the one guy gets the bee on his head, the beehive, and the other girl. Yeah, it's just a funny scene. There's some great moments. We watched Scary Movie 2 together once, and that movie is
Mm-hmm.
like actual garbage. There was only one part we laughed the whole time. It was the basketball, the basketball scene.
That's not even like a horror parody. That's just like a pop culture parody of the time. And like it means nothing to us in particular, but we were just like, what the fuck is going on right now?
That was so funny. And then it's also like the only thing that I remember seeing Francis in, other than Malcolm in the Middle. So like, what a shitty movie to be in. Like his legacy is one of the greatest TV shows of all time, and then Scary Movie too.
He's got funny moments in that, like when he throws the basketball at Anna Faris and she just crashes into the table.
Yeah, I like all the slapstick. Like they really go all out with it, and the parody movies. Like you could talk trash about Scary Movie all you want, but there are some other parody movies out there that are way worse. That epic movie bullshit, that was like one of the worst things I've ever seen ever. Meet the Spartans, so bad.
No, yeah, I mean, so yeah, it's a Scream and Scary Movie are like a weird like marriage in a way. They both inspired like worse versions of themselves. So Scream, you get I Know What You Did Last, which is like written by Kevin Williamson like Scream, but it's just not quite good. And you have Urban Legend, which is like, oh, Scream is about movies. Let's make a movie about urban legends, and it's terrible. It sucks. I hate it. And then Scary Movie brings on the movies you said, disaster movie, epic movie, or whatever the fuck, and they're
Disaster
terrible.
movie. Yeah. Making a parody of a parody of a parody is next level terrible.
Someone should have parodied Scary Movie and called it
Dude,
Scream.
I'm not gonna lie. I do miss parody movies. Don't get me wrong. But there was too many of them, and that's what kind of killed them. Because they just became like saturation, and the quality went down, 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 down. The last good one I remember seeing was the Survivor games. It
I don't
was
even
like a
know that one.
parody. Yeah, it came out in the early 2010s. It's like the very like the last little like fart of the parody genre. The Starving Games was a parody of the Hunger Games, movie, and it actually was pretty funny. Me and Josh were watching it like a couple months ago. One night we were like drinking or something, and it's like a YouTube poop movie. Like it's so funny. It like reached that point. Like we went past like parody movies and we entered the space of YouTube poop and we got like a YouTube poop parody movie. And it's really good. They make all the characters like look just like the ones from Hunger Games and they do a good job playing on pop culture jokes at the time. It's not like a holy grail or anything, but it's a funny watch.
We're going off topic from horror now, but I do want to say the best parody movie is probably Walk Hard, the Dewey Cox story, because despite being a parody of biopic movies, that movie is very clever and funny, and I could
That's
laugh
the best one of
hysterically
all
watching
time.
it
It's actually well
easily.
thought out. Yeah. There's an underrated one too with Drake Bell. I forget the name of it, but it's like a Spider-Man parody. He's the Dragonfly.
I have no idea what you're talking about. What the fuck?
There's a Drake Bell Spider-Man parody with Leslie Nielsen. He plays a dragonfly instead of spider. I saw it on TV once. It was pretty funny.
What the hell? Drake Bell Dragonfly? I gotta look at images of this. Oh, this is underwhelming. He just looks like a superhero in like green spandex. I was expecting him to look like Jeff Goldblum's The Fly.
Yeah, no, it's his costume's not the best, but the movie is underrated. I mean, the rating says 4.7 out of 10, but I remember laughing. It's definitely better than Epic Movie.
I believe
Whatever.
you.
Let's go back to horror.
Well, like so after those movies, you see a rise in police procedurals, as I mentioned. Like the police is a heavy element in Scream 2, and then with Saw coming out, you get a heavy police procedural movie with that too. And Saw again creates its own imitators in like the torture porn genre.
Fuck that genre.
Like is a part of that, like Human Centipede and like Hostel, and like probably a few other ones that nobody remembers just because it's just fucking carnage for carnage sake.
That is an important point, though. You bring up Saw kind of is like a fun mystery movie in a way. It's like a similar element to Silence of the Lambs, but instead of going into like the great dialogue and storytelling and everything, they just go right into the fucking holy shit. Let's just gross out the audience and torture people. That's where it
Mm-hmm.
kind of loses me. But like the mystery element, like in the beginning, where they're trying to like figure out like who are these people being killed, why are they being killed, like that same kind of intrigue as Silence of the Lambs is there. They just don't run with that. They run with the other thing. And especially as the series goes on, the stories become less and less important, and the more convoluted traps and more gruesome deaths become the focus of the franchise.
Yeah, I've had a few people like recommend like, oh, you should watch the Saw movies, and I'm just like, I can't imagine like what's gonna be so different and interesting about like Saw 5 or whatever the fuck. Like I can't, like the first one was enough for me. Like I got it.
Me too. After I watched Saw 1, I was like, all right, it's not like the greatest thing, but I see the appeal. But like I have no desire to watch Saw 3. I remember seeing a scene of it when I was like 10. It was on TV and I was freaked out for like weeks. Like I saw that the scene. There's this guy. He has like these nails that go like into his ribs, and then like the machine explodes out. And there's this other guy who had like there was a key in acid, and he had to put his hand in the acid to get the key out. And I was just like, why am I even watching this? And I turned it off, but I was still like, I had that feeling of being like super shook and frightened for a while. Should not have seen that when I was 9 or 10 years old.
I just love the thought of that. Just like watching the most like disgusting, like brutal shit you can imagine, and then being like, why am I watching this?
Yeah, for sure. That's happened to me a
you
couple
know the
times.
be- you know what the best movie that Saw inspired though is?
Shrek 2.
No, Cleaver.
Oh, fuck yeah, dude. Cleaver is legendary. I don't know why I said Shrek 2. Cleaver had the legendary brother of Alec Baldwin, known best for Cleaver.
That Danny, that Danny Baldwin, he's a mean fuck. That one.
Yeah. And isn't there a legendary sex scene in that movie too?
I think so.
Danny Baldwin gets
Many
his freak on.
many claim he's a portrayal of Tony Soprano, but I don't see it.
I don't see it either. I remember we were watching that episode of The Sopranos and the Cleaver came on. We were both like, what the fuck is this? And then we finally figured it out. That was a good surprise.
Saw was so big at the time that The Sopranos had to comment on it, had to include it in there. So,
Saw meets Godfather 2. It's going to be a big hit, Tom. Two genres that are proven to be successful.
we love it.
For sure.
So another genre, kind of in the element of realism, but still, they figured out a way to blend realism and supernatural with a couple of movies with found footage. So you get the Blair Witch Project, which infamously people are like, people thought this was real. Like it premiered at Sundance, and everyone was like, "Oh, we thought this was like real snuff footage or whatever." And like they had the actors like have no like presence on like red carpets or anything. They were just like hiding from everyone else and like not doing any publicity. And apparently, like it's true. Like people were like actually buying into the whole the Blair Witch is a real thing, but it's like the type of thing where it's like you had to be there almost because I like almost cannot force myself to buy that intelligent people believe that was real.
Yeah, I'm gonna 100% hit the agree button on what you just said because when I first watched the Blair Witch Project, it was like my early teens. I was with a few friends, and we all liked horror movies. We were expecting something really scary, and it was a huge letdown in the room. It was kind of just three guys or three people walking through the woods with like subtle noises every once in a while and like some witch like little statues, stick figures and stuff. Like it was nothing really that was that scary. It was all acting, which is respectable in itself that they were able to make a huge hit out of basically nothing. But for me and the way that I personally write and make films, I always need something to deliver in the end. And I felt like it kind of ended with a wet fart and we didn't really get a payoff with the witch. Like I didn't even need to see the witch's face, but even just like closure that there was a witch would have really escalated it for me. People say like, no, it's a genius ending. Like all they did was just like shake the camera around and then drop it, and one guy was staring at the wall.
I think that's part of the like you had to be there element where like I watched it too and it didn't do anything for me personally. But I guess if you're going into it sort of being told like, oh, this is like snuff footage we found on someone's camera, then maybe you're sort of like going into it more intrigued and a little more like, oh, what the hell is like going to happen? Like what am I gonna see go wrong?
Yeah, no fucking way I would believe that that was real. If I saw the camera footage, it's real. It's real. I mean,
It
there's
is like
nothing even to believe. Like, what's the real part? Like, oh, they saw stick figures in the woods? That's real. It's not real.
it is like funny, like imagine like them actually finding like snuff footage of people dying and being like, "Oh, let's premiere this at Sundance."
Yeah, you'd have to be a real idiot. I've seen such shitty things premiered at film festivals. That would at least be more interesting than some of the other shit I've seen. Have I ever told you a story about like the film festival I went to as soon as we graduated college?
I think so, a little bit.
Yeah, there was like just a guy in a morph suit running through the woods with a GoPro in his hand for 10 minutes. That's all it was. Just a guy running through the woods with like a weird effect with no music, no nothing, just like the wind hitting the microphone. There was another
It's
person who
experiment.
was just like in a box with like red and blue lights flashing, just playing the clarinet. for like 5 minutes.
Low budget indie filmmaking.
Yeah, it was just stupid. Like, how is that even? There's no story. Like, you can't seriously present something like that to a big audience. I would never do it.
I'm sure you're
I would
right. I
always
didn't
make
see
sure.
them. I'd have
I
to
would make
watch
sure
them myself.
it delivered. No, you do not have to watch them yourself. Take my word for it. They suck.
But I want you to send me your copy of Man Playing Clarinet in a Box.
Fuck that. But yeah, Blair Witch. It was nothing special in my eyes. I know it was huge at the time, and it was even parodied on Trailer Park Boys. It just never really did it for me. You said it never really did it for you. Uh, it inspired a bunch of sequels that are probably even shittier than the first one. But what can you say? It's a product of its time. I prefer the product of the 80s time. Remember we said the same thing about Friday the 13th Part 1? I think that's a better
Mm-hmm.
movie than Blair Witch. That movie delivers. At least the last 20 minutes are entertaining.
Yeah, you're right. So another like found footage movie that got really popular and had a lot of sequels was Paranormal Activity. Another movie I don't care for at all. And people will be like, "Watch more of the Paranormal Activities," and I'm like, "Why? Like, what is in Paranormal Activity 2 that's any different than the first one?"
All right. I'm going to say a little bit of defense here. I agree these movies are not like, God's gift to horror or anything like that. But what I will say is um dude, I just realized something.
What?
I was drunk the other night and uh me, Dean and uh Josh played with the Ouija board.
Okay.
I completely forgot about it. Nothing came out of it. Like we were all holding our hands on it for like a couple minutes and like nothing happened. We kept saying, "Is there anyone there?" and it never responded.
Your house is free from spirits.
Yeah, but I just remembered that and it freaked me out because I forgot. I was so blackout drunk that night. Anyway, back to the thing. What was I going to say? What were we just talking about? What were we talking about?
Paranormal Activity.
All right, you're okay. You're right. These movies are not God's gift to horror or anything, right? But they are great. Like summer teenage group of friends, like girls and guys, like going to see a horror movie just to scream at the screen and just be a cheese fest. Like I think they're really good at that. Like if you see it in a theater, it's like a fun like experience just to like goof around. But as any like serious horror or film analysis, you're right. They're dog shit. But I will say they're really good at that one specific thing. Like they're a fun, like summer little horror movie.
Are they? I can't imagine like that being fun. I imagine like that being like a turn this shit off kind of movie. Like put on something interesting.
Well, no, like in a theater, like a packed theater, like with a bunch of teenagers, like all screaming, like just like with your friends and stuff, like a cheese fest, like a cheesy movie. It was
Mm.
always good at that. That's the reason why they made so many sequels because everybody wanted to go see them. Nobody buys them on DVD and watches them over and over again. It was all about the theater experience, just like the loud bangs and the jumps and things like that. It was just like a classic thing to do when we were teenagers. Go see the new paranormal movie.
I guess that's been replaced sort of by the supernatural demon movies in the next decade, which we're probably going to talk about a little more next time. But like,
For sure.
the James Wan Conjuring verse.
Oh yeah, for sure. Those movies are way better. It's not even close.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, they were just meant to be cheesy blockbusters. But I agree, they do nothing for me outside the theater.
I'm trying to see if there's anything else we can talk about, and I'm looking up 2000s horror, and I'm just like, what the fuck is all this shit? Like, I don't know any of these things. Like, They Nest,
The Ring.
Supernova, The Convent, The Ring, The Ring.
You have the ring. Oh my god, you fell for the oldest trick in the book, man. I can't believe you.
I
so
forgot about not even on here, but I guess because it's a remake, so maybe it wouldn't fall under
you want to
this
close
list.
this
But
thing
yeah,
out with a conversation? You want to close this thing out with a conversation about the ring?
is this going to be another movie where we just say like, yeah, this was a big movie at the time, neither of us care for it?
I have a few moments that I think were cool. It was big in pop culture. Is that like what this is? Is that what we could sum this whole like era of horror to? It was big at the time, but it didn't hold up at all, and it's not good going back to watch it. Is that like everything we've talked
Yes,
about besides Scream? Besides Scream?
Silence of the Lambs.
Oh yeah, that's true. So the '90s was kind of like a little different, but once we got late '90s, 2000s, it became like really shitty.
I think 2000s for movies in general is a fucking weird era. Like post 9/11, we didn't know what we were doing, man. Just watch like Scooby Doo 2002. Like, what the fuck was going on, man?
Fucking magic was in the air. What do you mean, dude?
I
All
I mean like the culture.
right, let's talk about Ring for a little bit. Obviously, huge at the time, parodied in a too many things to count, especially Scary Movie 3. Uh, I was more familiar with the parodies. Honestly, I watched it with my ex girlfriend a couple of years ago, and I knew exactly what was going to happen. Even my sisters, we made like a home movie. I wish I could find it. We probably have it somewhere on tape in our house. But my sister came out of the TV and then killed me and killed all my sister and her friends. Like she was like the ring girl. Uh, so it was huge in pop culture at the time. We all knew what it was, even if we didn't see the movie. Basically, is what I'm saying. But when I rewatched it with my ex girlfriend a couple years ago, I was like, this is not even really like a horror movie. Like I was expecting her to pop out of the fucking TV like every 15 minutes and kill somebody. She does it once in the opening scene, which is like baby's first horror movie actors. Like these two actresses are like, oh my god, I heard like there's a curse and like a phone call, blah blah blah. It doesn't fit the tone of the rest of the movie at all. It's like this cheesy garbage opening scene. Then it becomes a weird art movie, like mystery, like detective, shitty horror art movie, and then the ending it becomes The Ring again, where she comes out of the TV. Like there's all this weird shit where they show like this gothic imagery. There's all a bunch of dark tones, horses killing themselves, like a lady brushing her hair. I know it all ties into the story at the end, but I didn't care for that story, and I didn't find it scary. I thought it was stupid. And the the funniest thing that ever came out of The Ring, like the best thing that came out of that whole movie, the parodies of everything, is the shot from inside the well. And in Scary Movie 3, when they show the shot from inside the well, and then some guy's ass crack goes on top of it and starts taking a shit. That was the best thing that came out of that whole franchise.
So, what would we say about this era of just like horror in general, and then like it constantly being parodied and like fueling parodies like of itself?
It wasn't the best, but it's a part of our lives, and we'll always remember it. So it was memorable, but the movies don't necessarily hold up like some other decades that we've reviewed and talked about.
Yeah, I will say I'm a little more excited for our next discussion, which is going to be about the more modern horror movies we got, which I feel like are a lot more methodical and like earnest and genuine with like intent to actually like unnerve and unsettle. And I think just in general, horror is in a pretty good place right now. So I'm excited to like talk about some of our favorite movies over the past few years.
For sure, we said going into it that this is probably going to be the one we're least excited for. I think we still had a fun conversation, but we could both agree that this is like the era that we have the least to say about, and it's evident in the podcast. So tune in next week for the 2010s to the modern era of horror, and we're going to talk about my favorite horror movie of all time.
The Conjuring 2?
No, close though. Any closing statements, Nick?
No, I'm good. I can't wait for next time.
Hell yeah. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you for listening to the end of the podcast.